everyone. Welcome to the Raised by Wolves podcast. I'm your host, Joe, and today I'm going to be, riding solo. My co-host, JC, is tied up, but we have a pretty cool episode for you guys today. We're going to take a little bit of a different direction, and we have a special guest today here, my friend Mike Buss. How you doing, man?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for coming in. I wanted to, I'm a fan of your podcast, the Graffiti Machine.
Thanks, man.
It was a lot of the inspiration that went into doing a podcast was because of your podcast, honestly. It was funny because I listened to, like a couple of years ago, someone told me, you should listen to Buss's podcast. And I said, well, I don't necessarily need to hear another podcast about LA graffiti. You know what I mean? Because over the last 30 years, I've heard a lot of stories about LA graffiti. But then the cool thing about it is listening to your podcast, I noticed that, of course, you incorporate a lot of graffiti because that's been a big part of your life, as it is mine. But, it's about life lessons. And I think that's where we've connected and developed a friendship, is over just kind of some of the same ideologies and thoughts, and beliefs, What was your inspiration in starting the podcast?
Well, it's kind of a lot to it. I mean, it came from starting my studio. So in 2015, I opened up Machine Studio. But if anybody's familiar, I'm sure your listeners probably aren't. But it's kind of like a graffiti shop, a print shop, and things like that. But what it really started out as is a community space for graph writers, because I was reaching a point in my life where I was like, I want to be involved in graffiti still, but I'm older and I'm not really interested in doing it the way that I used to do it. So I wanted to create something to give back to the culture, and also sort of try to put some positive influence, I guess you could say, into the culture. So it was like
inject some positive into what most people would think is a negative culture.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm coming at it. I was about 45, I think, probably at the time, or fuck, I was younger.
When you get older, you forget where
maybe I was 40. I don't know. How old am I now? I'm 49 now. So yeah, I guess I was more like 41 or whatever I was in 2015.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that place just basically opened up, and it was just an empty space, and there was a table in the middle, and it was just for sketchbooks.
You still have that table, right?
Yeah, that's the same table. So once I started doing that, and I started like seeing, all these like high school kids coming in, and they had a place to go after school, so they'd have their uniform on and shit still, and they'd be in their black booking. And then I started noticing like some of them came in and they were on drugs, and I'm like, what's up with your boy? Like he's not just, that's not just weed. Like there's something else going on. Like he's puking outside. He's, I was like so it just sort of snowballed into, me kind of like, I need to do more than this. So all these different ideas, and we started like working on like doing nonprofit work, and we started this crew called the Cuts Crew. I know this is a really long
no. This is exactly why I have you on here.
Okay.
So you're actually answering questions right now. I'm thinking in my mind like, okay, I'm not going to ask him that, because but this is literally, we're going to take the scenic route to get there, but there's a huge reason why you're here, and obviously because we're doing things together. So just keep going, man. Like I'm
so I mean, it all kind of ties into it. So, I became really inspired by doing that, So the Cuts Crew, this crew called Clean Up the Streets, it was like, what else the question kept coming, like, what else can I do?
Which is almost an oxymoron, just so you know, because Cuts Crew is Clean Up the Streets, which I hella respect what you do with Cuts, but graffiti, it's when you hear graffiti, if you're again an outsider, you're like cleaning up the streets, you're like vandalizing the hell out of things, like, so it's like
for sure. And I think that was what was so interesting about it. It was like, everything that I was doing, and I say we, like it was me by myself, and then every now and then some other people would come in and out, so I'll always just refer to it as we, but I mean, I started all of it. But for me personally, it was like the more I did, the more I thought I got to do more and I got to do more, until I kind of like burned the candle at both ends. And then I was like, okay, I need to focus on some certain specific things that I feel like are making the most impact. So like the cuts crew, clean up the streets. It was like, can we create this, like a graffiti crew, like, is a typical, basically the bunch of graffiti writers doing graffiti together, and like you get an initiation or whatever, different crews operate differently. But so I was like, can we create a crew that is different, that is an additional path? And sort of the idea behind it was, you have crews that are like bombing crews that are out there to do just vandalism and like get up as much as possible. And then you have crews that are known for piecing.
Yeah.
And it was almost like you go one of two ways. Like there's obviously like nuance to it, but like you're either like a bomber or you're a piecer. And then some people are kind of more well-rounded, but it was like those two paths so you could go. And I was like, could we make a third path? So the cuts crew was intended to be sort of that third path. Like, can you use your graffiti to do service for the community and make the community better? So we were like cleaning up alleys, the alleys with like that fucking mattress and all that stuff. And so we would clean all that up and do a nice mural that says clean up the streets. So that's another thing. And then what was it? There was 3 programs: the clean up the streets, the community art studio. I'm totally drawing a blank because if there was 3, what's the third? I don't know. No. I think my brain is like frozen up right now. But
you can put on the spot, man.
But the point is it just kept sort of the question of what else can I do?
Yeah.
And that's when I thought about the podcast. It was kind of like, I have this community space and I can get these people to come in and have a safe venue to do what they want to do, express themselves and stuff. And I was trying not to get in their business. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like my thought pattern was like, these kids probably have enough people telling them what not to do.
Yeah.
And what they should be doing with their lives and all that stuff. So I was like trying to be somewhat hands off.
Yeah.
But then I was kind of like, any opportunity I saw, like if a kid was doing something, I'd be like, hey man, that's like, it's not a good path. Like these like 15-year-old kids would come in and he's got his mouth open and he's drooling and his eyes are all fucked up. And I'm like, what's up with you, man? And he's like, oh, I took an ecstasy pill. I'm like, you're too young to be fucking around with that shit.
Yeah.
And like, not that any age it's good,
but at 15, your brain's not even fully developed.
Yeah. I'm like, don't fuck around with that shit, man. Like, if you want to smoke weed, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but like, don't get into that stuff. Like I could pick my spots and try.
The world is glamorized too. So it is good what you do, and there needs to be more people like you know what I mean, that actually gives a shit about what the youth is doing. Because even myself being around graffiti all these years, it bothers me even when my own crewmates will like almost condone the actions of like guys that are younger that are coming up, where we're supposed to be taking them under our wing to like show them like a different path, and we're condoning them getting fucked up all the time or just being like complete like burnouts at such a young age.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've always commended you since I've met you, like on like that you actually give a shit about the youth. You're not just a writer, and that almost becomes secondary, big time secondary to me on like what you've done with graffiti is like what you're doing to help the community, and what you started doing is like way more important in my opinion.
It feels like that to me. And to your point, like that condoning bad behavior, I get asked about stories and shit. I'm like, I don't really want to tell those stories. It's like, the sort of stuff out there in the graph culture, it's kind of like, buy your paint, and if you don't rack, you're not down, and all that stuff. And it's like, I did have that mentality, and I did a lot of shit. Like, there's a lot of stories I could tell about shit that we did that would be somewhat impressive to these kids. But like, I don't want you to do that shit. Like, if I tell you all the shit that we used to do, and you think, like, oh, Bus used to do that.
Yeah, I used to do that, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't want you doing that stuff. Like, go get a job, like, and just buy your paint, get bucket paint from Home Depot, cheap, like just whatever.
Do you feel that I know this is a crazy question to ask. Well, it's relevant, very relevant. Do you think that, you know how there's always that story, when do you become your parents? You know what I mean? Like, when are you reaching? Like, do you feel because of graffiti, because, even if it's not like out there doing illegal stuff, we're both, I'm 45, you're 49, and we're both very involved. I mean, you have a graffiti business. Technically, I have a graffiti business I just partnered with, and so we still have our ear to the ground on what's going on in the graffiti community, but at the same time, like, we're in a unique situation to where we have done something with our lives, and we should be telling people, like, look, you can be a graffiti writer, but you don't have to be some wasteoid, like, you know what I mean, some wasted youth, you know what I mean, a graph writer, and showing a different path, mentoring, like, like crews are supposed to be doing,
Yeah. Well, and for me, it's like the balance of things, so this question comes up, actually it probably comes up in my head more than anybody ever asks, but it's like, I fully support, and maybe this is like not some people, well, here's the thing. I fully support illegal graffiti, and I fully support legal graffiti. You know what I mean? So from a graffiti writer's standpoint, I'm not going to take the stance where these people are coming in and I'll be like, you shouldn't be out there doing illegal graffiti. You know what I mean? It's like, that would be counter to what the culture is. And at the same time, I try to make sure that I stay, I feel like I became, or I've naturally been good at riding both sides of the fence, So when I opened my spot in San Pedro, at first I was like, this is like, we're going to have all these graffiti writers, and like everybody in the neighborhood's going to hate us, and, all of this kind of stuff. But then I started realizing, like, I have this ability to, like, well, I don't know if it's an ability, but I can see both sides. So like when I would have a conversation with somebody from, say, like the Arts District Council or whatever the fuck they were called out there in San Pedro, and these are like elderly people, and they would come into the shop and they'd be like, oh, what is it you do here? And it'd be like, I would lead with the community shit, I'd say, we want to give these kids, like, these kids are out doing all this shit, want to provide this nice venue for them to be able to express themselves, and it's a graffiti related endeavor, and so through that kind of stuff, I found that, obviously leading with that stuff, and there's certain people that I'll say certain things to, and certain people that I won't. Like, if somebody, some 65-year-old person comes in and they'd say, like, oh, I really hate graffiti, but I think it's cool what you're doing here, I'm not going to tell them, like, hey, like, I still support illegal graph,
exactly.
But I'll tell them the community stuff. But at the same time, like, any young graph writer, if I have a conversation with them, like, I'll be very transparent about that. Like, hey, man, like, I believe in illegal graffiti, and I understand, like, what that's all about. But I also understand why people don't like it. So I'm not going to try to convince either side. I'm not going to try to tell people that are like, I fucking hate seeing that shit on the freeway and all that stuff. I'm not going to try to convince them why I think it's cool, and the other way, when somebody's a full illegal graph writer, I'm not going to try to convince them why I think legal graph is cool too. I'm like,
it's all part of the like you said, the culture. Like, you can't have really one without the other. And I would never I don't think I'll ever be at a point in my life, no matter what I'm doing business wise or sobriety wise or graffiti wise, where I just know I'm at the end of the day, I tell people all the time, like, I'm still at the end of the day a vandal that just got a little older. Now I'm just not vandalizing like that anymore, because, but graffiti, actually illegal graffiti, saved my life personally, because growing up in a bad neighborhood, you were either on drugs, sold drugs, got in gangs, stayed at home because you were bullied. There was not very many options growing up in San Bernardino, Muscoy, San Bernardino, in the hood as a white kid, so I was a pretty decent drawer. So then I just started drawing on walls, essentially, you know what I mean? And when I became pretty decent at that pretty quick, like, then I became, like, I could fit in with the shit neighborhood, because I was the guy that, like, if anything, people wanted to be my friend, because they'd say, like, oh, that's, such and such that you just painted that billboard, or you just painted that. So I became very accepted in a lot of different circles because of graffiti. So just that alone, as much as most people won't understand that, I could never turn my back on the illegal side of graffiti just for that reason alone, you know?
I've heard that a lot. Like, graffiti saved my life, because of all the shit that you're
There used to be
about.
somebody used to print a shirt, I think. That
really?
That, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I never
that
wanted
makes
to
sense.
buy it because at the time I still felt that would have been like weird to own shirts that said things like that. But
Yeah.
I remember seeing a shirt one time, or maybe a few times, that said graffiti saved my life. And, you know, to a person that doesn't understand the graffiti culture, you know what I mean, would be like, yeah, that's dumb. You know?
Yeah,
but
it doesn't make a lot of sense. But then when you really break it down, it's understandable. Like,
yeah,
a lot of people say that, like, it was either gangs or graffiti, and it's like, once you go on the graffiti side, they're like, oh, he's into that shit, like, whatever.
Yeah,
you know.
And then I think that, and so ultimately, not to sidetrack too much, is that you end up starting the podcast because ultimately that was the next step in the evolution of what you were doing.
Yeah. I got sidetracked, but that's where I was getting to. Essentially, was it was another one of those. What else can I do?
Yeah.
You know, I have this space. I have these skills that I've built up because I did motion graphics. I still do that, so I had like ability to use equipment, and I kind of had an understanding of editing and all this. And I was like, I could do that shit. I wasn't very comfortable with my voice, you know, like a lot of people. Most of us don't like to hear our...
Oh, I hate watching these episodes.
Yeah.
Like the first episode, the first official guest that we had on here was Jimmy, the guy that helped me get sober.
Yeah.
And I had a headache that morning. So on top of already being self-conscious, like I feel like I'm stuttering the whole time because I was fighting like a really bad headache.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? And, you know, it's, and so now, but when I hear my voice, I have this stupid tick, or like I laugh at things. So I don't think anyone, if you really care about your craft, you're probably always going to critique it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean, that's part of being a graffiti writer itself. You're always going to look at pictures of your stuff and critique it.
Yeah, there's always something wrong.
Yeah, always something wrong, you know?
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. Nothing is perfect, ever.
Yeah. Well, like I said, your podcast inspired me. It does talk a lot about, I didn't want to turn the episode into a promo for your podcast, but I think it is important for even our listeners and our viewers, especially as we go on some of the same platforms that you'll be on, to know that it is obviously it's not a sobriety podcast. It's more of, what would you classify the podcast as?
Well,
like,
so
categorize it.
What I talk about, or what I pretty much describe it as, it's like I'm sharing the personal development information that's helpful to me. It's a podcast for the graffiti culture, but it's not about graffiti.
Gotcha.
So, with that said, you know, anybody can listen to it and probably find some benefit from it, unless they're like way further along and way more well-read than me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not sharing all this information that like I fucking sat and meditated for 20 hours and all of a sudden these visions popped in my head, and this information came from the, you know, wherever that is, some spiritual place. It's stuff that I learned, and I try to cite where I learned it from. I'll say, hey, I learned this from this book. This is something I found really helpful, and I'll kind of craft an episode around that. And then I try to bring in some graph stuff in there. And to your point earlier about, you know, I don't really need to listen to another graffiti podcast. It was sort of like, I started that with Cub, and we're probably going to end up talking about him. So our whole idea was like, how can we contribute to making the graffiti culture better? And it's like, it's kind of like saying, how can you make the world better? It's like, you know, you have to pick a lane and try to attack, or a niche or whatever. You try to get in there and figure out how to do that. You know, so how do we make the graffiti culture better? The first episode was based on a conversation that Cub and I had.
Yeah.
And I remember when I don't know why I'm stuttering. My brain is going faster than my mouth can spit the words out. But I was batting around this idea for a podcast, and I had told Cub that I was thinking about a podcast, and I hadn't asked him to do it with me. I just told him, I want to do something. I don't want to try to make, you know, because these youngsters are coming in, they don't understand the rules of the game, and like this mentorship hasn't been passed down. And I kind of started noticing that, you know, when I was younger, I remember there was people like reaching out to be like, hey, this is how you do this, and this is how you don't do this. And some of my early mentors, GK and Eclipse, they would go out of their way to make sure you had the information you needed. And I kind of felt like these kids weren't getting that information.
It's been diluted for sure.
And so I was talking to Cub about it, and we were having this long conversation about the rules and like respect and respecting your area, don't burn the spot, all of the shit that like we older guys tend to talk about a lot. And in the middle of the conversation, I was like, this is the podcast.
That's the episode.
And I was like, this is what we should do. You want to do this with me? And he's like, yeah, let's do it.
So and I've heard those episodes, like don't burn the spot, like, you know what I mean? Rules of the game, stuff like that. Like,
so the first episode was me and him talking about that. But then after that, it was like, well, what do we talk about now? Like,
yeah, exactly.
What's the next step? You know, because, you know, there's only so much you can really get. You can't do a whole, I'm 93 episodes in now. Like, I couldn't talk about that for 93 episodes. So it was like, what's next? So it kind of started evolving quickly into the best way to help improve the culture is to help the people that are participating in the culture
from
improve
within
themselves.
Like culture, like I think change. Well, it's not a saying that I came up with. I don't know who was the first person that quoted this, but change needs to happen from within. You know what I mean? And you're part of that culture, and to change it positively, it makes sense that, you know, you have the resume, you and Cub had the resume to help make that change, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of what we were hoping. I mean, at least we're two people that are credible enough that you can ask around and like, oh yeah, he's a real graph writer. He's not just some, because I'm sure there's podcasts out there where people are like talking about something that they didn't really actively participate in. And
oh yeah, there's a bunch. I've been on quite a few podcasts, and I'd probably be on twice as many if I didn't go online and read who was doing the podcast. You know what I mean? I need to make sure they're not as, you know, I don't know if it was cannabis or graffiti where I heard this, but I've never wanted to be involved in anything where a culture vulture has been attached to, you know what I mean? Like I want just real, you know, JC, you know, my normal co-host here, he said something the other day. He said, you know, we visited a facility, and he said, these are winners, like, and I only want to work with winners. And I go, exactly, like, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean just financially winning, but just like winners in life that have a focus and moving forward. And you know what I mean? And you guys had that pedigree, like, you know what I mean, to be able to, you know, do that. And that's why I think people respect the podcast, and why I respected it. Like I said, the first episode I heard was kind of one that we'll talk about a little bit in a minute here, but just going back from that podcast, I went back to episode 1, and I don't even know, because I've skipped all over the place. Your podcast is so short sometimes, where I literally purposely do it when I like need an extra 16 to 25 minutes, you know what I mean, to fill my drive or something. I go, okay, what's going on? 12-minute episode, you know, but then some are hour, you know what I mean? So
I'm trying to get them a little bit longer. That's something that people have been saying. They're like, it's not long enough for me to get to work, you know, so then I have to find something else. And I'm like, okay,
but
that's
perfect. I listened to a podcast sometime. I listened to one the other day. It was 3 hours long on the way to Vegas, and it was so crazy that it just went, when it's good content, it'll just go by. And then when it's really good content and it's 15 to 16 minutes long, like some of your episodes, it hits the point, which I appreciate, because I know your personality now. You're very like, this is how it is. Okay, see you later. Anything else to talk about? I got work to do. You know what I mean? And so, but it is, they are cool episodes.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And so kind of kind of talking, you know, this is obviously an addiction and a recovery podcast. I didn't want to start this podcast. I was very specific in my intention in starting this. I didn't want to turn this into just everyone coming in, just telling their story. That's important, obviously, because people are very relatable, I believe, to a lot of the guests that will be on the show, that, you know, that have been on the show. But a big part of what we're doing, and you were like probably the first or second person that I talked to about, minus my partner Pete in California, is that you can get sober, and you know, and you can start, you know, I mean, going, you know, either through the steps, or, you know, you attach yourself to somebody that's sober, and like, you know, you're being mentored, almost like we talked about with the graffiti world. You know, it's smart to attach yourself to somebody, you know what I mean, that's going where you want to go. And I believe that true for that's why sponsorship in AA and NA have worked for so long. You know what I mean? Whether you're in the steps or not, like I believe that that's important. Well, it's a sobriety podcast, and I really want to talk about, I want to end the podcast really with talking about like kind of what, we've talked about doing, what we've already kind of started as far as like mentoring people once they've gotten sober, or to your point earlier, like once you've gotten out of prison or incarceration, what do you do next after after you're committed to cleaning your life up? But a big part of why I also wanted to have you on here is because you're an example of like addiction affects everybody, and right around the time that I heard your first episode, it was like, I don't know if it was like a higher being or like, God or whoever it was, but I just randomly clicked on an episode. I didn't even look. I was like leaving the gym. I know I was walking into the gym and I hit an episode. It happened to be I'm sober, and so sobriety is a big part of my life, and I've lost a lot of people. I just lost somebody close to me, a couple weeks before that, and then I heard the episode where we lost Cub because of addiction, and I only met Cub one time, but I listened to him, actually on, I think it was like a different interview. I don't think it was a podcast. It was something on YouTube, and I met him, but I didn't know him. I couldn't say that he was like a friend of mine, but listening to the podcast after that first episode, it was the podcast that you did when, and I can tell that you were emotional during the podcast because you had lost not only a good friend, your co-host, and somebody that, if going back episodes before that, like, you would have never guessed that he would, I know that he was in recovery for a long time, and it just took, I think his sister said it, he was in recovery for X amount of years and only took X amount of minutes to lose him because of addiction.
Probably,
and without going into the details of what exactly happened, like, how did, with Cub in particular, and I'm sure there's others because we have similar circles, before meeting, how did that affect you and the people around you with Cub being so positive, because I think a lot of people have a preconceived notion that just because somebody's in recovery, they're going to stay in recovery, and especially if they're that positive. Listening to Cub, like, he captured an audience, like, what I mean? Like, he was, like, his presence, like, I'd love to have had him on an episode here or just been friends with him, what I mean? And it's like, and I'll never get that opportunity to do it. So what are your thoughts about, like, just losing him, how it's affected people around him, what type of person was Cub, and
I'm getting a little emotional thinking about this because you touched on a lot of things that really I'm trying not to get too emotional because I can't talk when that happens, but
man.
So he was the most positive person I ever met, like, hands down. And so to your point about him
Yeah, man.
You feel it kind of bubbling up, and you're like, wait a second, let's just, maybe I can address this later. I want to finish this talk. But it hit me by surprise because of that positivity. He was inspiring to me, and the thing about it was, in retrospect, after it happened, I learned a lot more than I did while he was here. So. For example, he was working for my company, and we started the podcast. We started doing all this stuff together. We put him in Cuts crew, and so he was involved in pretty much everything that I was doing. And he was working at the company, and he would say, "Hey, man, like, these meetings that I'm doing, they're really important that I get there. So, if I can leave at 2:30, that'd be really good." And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, dude. Do what you got to do," and I've heard people like me be referred to as a normie, like somebody that can just kind of dabble, and I probably did some things I shouldn't have done, but I never got caught into it, whatever that looks like. So at the time, I didn't quite understand what it was that I was seeing, and this was somebody that I aspired to be like, and so and like I said, it's all in retrospect, because at the time I was like, I didn't think of it as somebody that was battling something, you know? And so he must have been. I mean, obviously, if it took him out, I mean, it didn't seem that way because
That's addiction. That's
Yeah.
addiction, and I found that when I got sober too, that it's easier to not be sober for sure. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, so I got a little, the emotions got ahead of me, so I kind of forgot where we were going with this, but where were we going
I
with
think
this?
where my main thing was is what type of person, which you kind of touched on already, what Cub was, you know, and I think what I'm really, I guess, trying to drive home for like our listeners or our viewers is that, you know, addiction is very much not discriminatory. Like it can affect anybody. And listening to Cub, and you know, I didn't take anything too much away from it when I met him because it was a quick meeting, but like I've heard now from people, because I've talked to people who know Cub, that he was such a positive person, and you would have never guessed that him going through recovery and going to those meetings and things, a normie, as you called it, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, would have never guessed that a person like him is struggling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then how did that, you know, how did it catch you off guard when you not only you start
Yeah, yeah.
realizing that after he was gone?
Yeah, that's the thing. That was what was I was leading to now that I remember. So I remember getting the phone call from his sister, and like his name is Chris, and I never really referred to him as that. So this girl calls, and she's obviously very upset. And she's like, "This is Chris's sister," and I'm like, "Chris? Who's Chris?" You know? And she's like, "Cub," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, hey, how you doing?" And she's like, you know, Cub relapsed, and I was like, "What? How's that possible?" And I thought maybe he was like in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then she started talking about like arrangements and shit. And I'm like, wait, that's it? Like he's gone? Like just one
Yeah.
mistake? I'm like, fuck, man. Like I understand that shit, but like, you know, you're not ready for it. You know, you're not. I wasn't fucking ready for it, and I was kind of pissed in a way. You know, I was just like, fuck. And I got off the phone with her, and I turned around, and my youngster that was working for me, Adrian, was there, and I was like, Cub relapsed and he died. I just said it like that, and the kid just started crying, and I was just like, fuck. Like I didn't handle that right. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was crazy, man. It was fucking it was I tried not to do this, and Cub's sister brought this, Andy. She said, you know, you can't do that to yourself, because it was like when somebody passes away on something like that, or some suicide. I've had that happen before too, and it's like you start thinking like, what, I should have done this, I should have done that, and I didn't know that.
You
You know,
just did an episode that I'm gonna get into. Literally just did an episode on where I was gonna take this kind
oh,
of
okay.
too. You know what I mean? Last time, you know?
Oh yeah, and it was just, I just was like going over all this stuff, and I was thinking like, you know, one of the things that he used to do, and you've texted me, you know, I'm terrible about that. Like I don't respond, I forget, and I'm just bad about it. And so Cub, I feel real bad about this, and I might get emotional again, but he's the only person I knew that ever did this. Like he would send these like good morning messages, it's going to be a great day and shit like that, and like there's so many of them that I just didn't reply to. And it's
Believe
not,
it or not, that was probably part of his recovery.
yeah,
Is to make sure that like he started his day on a positive note.
yeah.
You know?
It turned out he was sending a lot of people those messages. Like after we did the podcast, he was on this one called Legends Thursday, and they did this like roundtable thing, and Cub was one of the people, and there was like 3 or 4 other people on there. And they were like, he was started sending us those texts too. Like he was just on a podcast with these guys. He never met them in person, and he starts saying, "Hey, good morning, brother."
Yeah.
You know, and fuck, it sucks, man. It really sucks, because when after I did the last time episode, and I was like, I wonder what my last time was, and like I looked at the text, and I fucking didn't reply, dude.
Yeah.
I didn't
tough.
reply. It's so fucked up.
Yeah. But you're right. Cub's sister's right. You can't beat yourself up about that. I
It's
still have,
not helpful.
up until a few phones ago, I still had the last text that I sent my sister, who passed from the same reason, and I had, and it was like an ugly text message. And
Oh
then
fuck.
now being sober now, like I look back on that and I'm like, she was fucking fighting, and like, yeah, I did give her a lot of chances up to that point to like get it together. And the last, I realized, speaking of last times, that the last time I talked to her before she passed was when she asked me, and she was, and my wife actually, made a good point on why she probably asked me this, is that she said, she said, I told her, I'm proud of you. Like, you've been clean for a while, I'm proud of you. And she said, would you hate me if I ever relapsed? And I would just like, I'd just be really disappointed. And then, of
Yeah.
course, being the brother, what I mean, that, was drinking beer at the time when she's asked me this, I said, and then I wouldn't want you around again.
Yeah.
And that was like a stupid fucking comment that I think about now, because she might have fallen off, maybe not completely at that point, but maybe slipped up and thought like, well, I can't tell my brother because he's not gonna want me around again.
Oh man,
And
that's
then
tough.
now I'm like harboring those feelings.
Yeah.
And my wife made a good point when I brought that up to her. Is she said she probably asked you that question that night because she had already messed up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, fuck. And I just basically told her, you messed up. I don't want you around. I never seen her. The next time I seen her was her tweaked out in front of a Goodwill in Redlands, California. And I was in traffic and something told me to pull into the parking lot, but I was running late to something. And I'm like, I'm not dealing with her shit right now. And that was last. I sent her a message. Hey, I seen you. You clean yourself up. That was my last text message to her.
Yeah.
So I can relate to the, in a similar way, I can relate that it's like, that was the last time I seen my sister.
It's
You know
tough.
what I mean? And that shit's like, that's tough.
Yeah, that's really tough. I'd have a hard time with that too, man.
Yeah. And I, with Cub, and what I've gotten is that, he was such a positive influence. He technically worked for you, right? He worked for you, but he was like the, what is it? What am I looking for? Like he was like an engine in a lot of way that fueled like the machine, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And I think with people hopefully that watch this really understand that if just because someone's sober, someone has gotten off of whatever they were on, for whether that's alcohol, drugs, things of that nature, and they're positive, they're still fighting a fight. And if they are still going through that shit, like, don't give up on them. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it might just be something as simple as like, hey, get your shit together. Like, I'll help you when you're ready. Or it could be literally just constantly just being there for them. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
don't know. Addiction is so weird. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it affects everybody differently.
Yeah. I mean, even after having that experience, I still don't know how to navigate it. And especially if you're dealing with somebody that's like constantly, I don't know what words to use, but like, no disrespect, but it's kind of fucked up,
Yeah.
they're just like all over the place. They're like, I haven't experienced this. So like my outside perception, like they're stealing things, they're scheming, they're doing all these things. And it's like the addiction is kind of like, I don't know how I would handle that. And I probably wouldn't do very well.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's just sort of like something that you said that I sort of think it's like, I'll be here when you need me. Like if you're ready and you want to do something, because you can't make anybody do anything. It was kind of like seeing those kids, there was one of those kids back in the early days of Machine, and there was one day when I looked around and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like they were like laying on the ground and shit, and like one kid was puking out by the tree, and I was like, this isn't what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm not trying to create a space for them to safely do this shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but at the same time, like you can only, in my opinion, you can only really offer help, but you can't convince somebody to, I don't think you can, unless
You can throw them a life vest. They don't, whether they
have to
grab
put
it or
it on,
not
yeah.
is up to them.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's where it was tricky with Cub, because like, I didn't think he needed any help. Like, and I kind of wish I thought differently. Like, I wish I had a better understanding of that idea that like, any one of us are one action away. I could die right after I leave here, like, and not because of addiction. Like a plane could hit me, you know what I mean? Like all this kind of shit. But like when you're dealing with an addict, and again, I just can't stress enough that I don't know from experience. This is my perception that there's a split second decision that, and Cub said something. He corrected me once, and I was actually kind of a little offended. I'm like, whatever, man. I said, fuck it, man. And he's like, you got to be careful with that. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, maybe you mean it this way, but like for me, when I say fuck it, like
time to go off the rails,
it could mean deadly consequences. And I didn't really realize what he meant until after he passed. And it's like, he said, I get a case of the fuck it's, and it's going to go bad.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, if should I do find myself in that same situation where I'm close to somebody that I know is in recovery and all those signs are there that I didn't understand, like I need to get to this meeting. He didn't talk about it a lot. Like he never told me he was struggling, but and I don't know that he was struggling. I think he was doing everything he was supposed to do and he was succeeding. But my understanding with addiction is like, so what ended up happening is he went to a place that was a trigger for him. Mm-hmm. So he went to a country that he used to do that stuff at, and he was in an area where he used to do that. And my understanding is that your sort of tools that you use can start to get kind of chipped away, when you get into a situation. And
I can only imagine when it comes to drugs, because I almost accidentally bought an alcoholic drink last night. I was going in there to find some kombucha or mata, and I almost bought it. And it wasn't until they triggered the ID to come over, and I said, why do I need an ID for that? And it was like alcohol, and I was like, oh, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And then, but what if I would have not caught it, got in the car, took a drink? Because I'm just kind of compare this to maybe potentially what happened with Cub. Got in the car, took a drink of it, been like, it's alcohol, but it does kind of taste good. I already bought it. You know what I'm saying? I'm already here. And then next thing you know, it's like all my decision making, it goes right out the fucking door once I start drinking. You know what I mean? And like, I'm only, as you're telling me this story, I'm thinking like, those triggers, when they come, you don't even see them coming. They're like getting hit in the face when someone you think you're cool with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they hit you quick.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Cub's sister said. I can't remember how she put it, but it was like, she said something along the lines of his addiction or whatever that is in the back of his brain doing jumping jacks. It's like ready to rock, So I think I'm getting a better understanding of how that could have unfolded. And that's where all this kind of like regret shit could have happened. Because I can remember when he was there, and I remember talking to him and he wasn't quite as positive as I remember. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating, but it's possible. I met I met a friend of his that I think was part of his sobriety group or whatever that is. He told me, he was like, man, I told him when he was going out there, I said, be careful because that place is a trigger for you. Or I don't remember the language, but it was something along those lines.
Trigger, probably.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, yeah, that's where, he had a lot of problems out there. And I don't know this detail. I know the details of what happened, but I don't know how that place was a trigger. I'm assuming he went out there and used, and like he had people out there that probably he should have avoided, streets that he probably shouldn't have walked down, stuff like that. And
you start romanticizing about the good times in those spots. I don't go to certain places, even though I love the food here in Vegas, because of how shit-faced I get there when I go there.
Yeah.
I just don't eat there anymore.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that I remember about when I was dabbling in drugs. Like I enjoyed sort of the process of I know you're not supposed to really talk too much about all that because it may trigger people, but there was certain things.
No, it's good to talk about those things because then you recognize it.
Yeah, there was like it was things that I enjoyed doing, like finding the guy and like doing all the, like I liked that stuff. Like it was fun, it was like, you didn't know that it was leading into some sort of thing. So I could imagine that if you're walking down a street where you used to like look for a certain person or something like that, like those kind of old memories might pop up. And like, I'm assuming that I don't know, like something just clicked and he said, fuck it.
Yep.
And that was it.
Thinking that, thinking that he could just get back on track, or, leave those monsters in another country,
Yeah.
It's like, there's, somebody the other day, yesterday was joking and said, do you just come out to Vegas because you have your life California where it's very, very busy. You go to Vegas because that's where you can just party and like be a different person. Mm-hmm. And I go, fuck no, I come to Vegas to rest. Like, I got less things going on in Vegas, where everyone else comes to Vegas to turn up. Like I come here to rest, but there's a place, like I said, I love eating. I'd love to still eat there. I probably almost definitely can go there and eat and not drink because I don't think about drinking anymore. Mm-hmm. When I do think about it, I think I purposely will go, man, that was an amazing time. And then I remember the end of the night and the next day and I go, no, don't need a hangover and don't need to pass out and, or cause shit with someone, But I could see where, the other day, somebody, I don't remember how they put it, but they basically said that they can't even drink anything sparkling because it'll trigger them. You know what I mean? To like drink beer and shit. And that's all of our triggers are different. Yeah. I like to give people shit sometimes that have been going to meeting for 25, 30 years and say like, if you still need a meeting after 30 years, like you got a serious problem or you've become addicted to the meetings. But I probably, that's my ego is my biggest problem that I'm working on still, is to think that like people do need those. Like people need meetings. They need ritual. How many times have you done 75 hard? You're on it right now. Like,
well, I fucking broke my toe, so I gotta spit it out.
Yeah. So
I thought about powering through it, but I'm like, then this thing's gonna fucking take forever to heal.
Exactly.
Like, this thing is smashed, man. So I'm gonna.
But 75 hard is like it's a positive routine.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is I have a very easy time getting off track. Like I'm in good shape, relatively. I used to be fat and I'm never going back to that, like everything sucks. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
That shit is not comfortable.
Yeah. No body positivity talk is going to work for me either.
Yeah. I get why that's there and like you shouldn't shame people, but at the same time, don't tell me that you're happy that way.
I wish people would have shamed me. The problem was everyone was yes man and me fucking everywhere I went. I wish people would like set me down and say, hey, you're fucking sweaty, you're getting disgusting, you're fucking drunk. Like if somebody would, actually the guy that helped me get sober almost pretty much told me that. Like, but the thing is, but I understand what you're saying, not to derail you.
No, I have an issue with that stuff. But so anyway, I'm not going back there. I'm not going back to that, like belly hanging over my pants and shit. I'm not doing that. But at the same time, this happens all the time. I'll do 75 hard. I'll start to see my abs, my shoulders are looking good. Like I never get to where I'm trying to get to, like I have this vision of like, I'm about to be 50 and I've never really had a six pack. And I'm like,
oh dude,
I got to just do that one time in my life.
These days, man, you can do whatever you want at 50 these days.
Yeah.
Modern medicine and herbs and fucking life, and
Yeah. But I mean, it's like, so that's one of my goals. Like, I don't care about vanity too much, but like, I want to be in like exceptional shape at one point in my life. I've been in good shape. I've been in much better shape than a lot of people, and I'm in pretty good shape now. But anyway, the point, like the 75 days ends, and that's supposed to be the boot camp to keep
live hard.
Live hard. Exactly. I've done that too. All the phases and everything, and it's really easy to start to slip back right away. It's like I like to do intermittent fasting, and then as soon as I'm off 75 hard, I'm like, cool, I'll have some breakfast, and then like I don't eat shit food mostly. Like I'm a vegan and I like plant-based and whole foods and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, you know, if I ever experienced addiction outside of like cigarettes, it might have been food, you know, because there was a lot of
tough one, man.
Yeah, because it's everywhere. I mean, that's why, you know, Andy brought up a good point, Cub's sister, that when she went into rehab, she thought that being an alcoholic was kind of like a lightweight kind of thing.
I did too.
So when she told the drug addicts, they were like, oh man, alcoholism, that sucks. Because like, I can't just go to literally any fucking place and buy heroin or something. You can go anywhere and buy alcohol. So
if you take alcohol itself, and this is true studies, I don't know who to quote here because I didn't think I'd be talking about it. If you take alcohol and you send it to a lab blindly to someone that is just there to read toxins and like poisons, they classify that shit as a poison.
Yeah.
And then somebody will say like, oh, that's alcohol. And they're like, the shit we're drinking. And it's actually helped a lot of people. And I wish I could quote the video. I seen a video on YouTube one time when I first stopped drinking. It would be these lab techs and they say, okay, you know the markers for poison. So we're going to give you shit to test. And there's like, you know, rat poison, all this different shit. And then they put alcohol there and they're like, this is horrible. What is this? Where would you find this? And they're like, that's vodka.
It's in your fucking Bud Light right there, man.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
You know, but you know, so it's like, it's crazy. You're right. Like I thought it was lightweight shit. When I started going to AA, I was told to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I went a couple meetings in and I'm like, this is a fucking joke. I'm not drinking anymore because I'm just tired of being this version of myself. But then I learned that, yeah, alcoholism is fucking crazy. It's serious. You know what I mean? I still, to this day, when I'll interview people like my partner Ian or Jimmy, you know, Jimmy was a crackhead. Like, you know, Ian was an active heroin addict, has track marks on his neck still, my partner, you know, and it's like, but then I don't even, you know what I mean? I don't even like, I don't think that I'm in that sometimes that category of like, you know, my resume is light in comparison, but when I look at it, I was told I had, you know, you're going to be, when I was 41, I was told you'll be lucky if you go down this path that you live to see 50. And I thought the doctor was an idiot. I'm like, I've never done drugs. I don't smoke cigarettes. And I'm like, but the whole time because I'm going to the liquor store to pick it up, I'm poisoning myself. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and that's scary to think, man. But, you know, it's crazy. But I want to, if you're okay, I want to talk for the rest of this episode about something that we've been talking about for a while and that I've already kind of kicked off with, you know what I mean? Because I want to do it in both California and Nevada, you know, and there's no framework to this. Like I'm purposely leaving it a little loose in the beginning because I over plan things a lot of times. And then what happens is that if it's not exactly where I want it to be, I tend to drag it out. And so I felt even starting to do that with this project that I'm going to talk about. And then I had to stop myself. That's why I stopped sending you messages like, I want to do this, I want to do that. I was like, no. This needs to organically involve, you know what I mean? Or this is going to be another job that I'm taking on, you know? Yeah. And so big reason having you on here, other than to talk about your perspective of losing somebody because of active addiction, is to talk about, you know, when you get sober and you get unincarcerated and you want to clean your life up, there needs to be this big, and I'm going to coin this term, is like, what's next? What's next part of like Raised by Wolves, and to do that with people that actually have walked the walk, you know? And I consider you, you know what I mean? I consider you somebody that is definitely walking the walk. We have a lot of similar diseases and addictions outside of addiction because like the other day like I had a dip in sales the week after. I'm in the cannabis industry, which is weird that I'm sober. You know what I mean? I'm in the cannabis industry, but I also don't precursor to that, as I don't believe that cannabis is you know, necessarily very harmful. I believe it's a plant-based medicine, but you can abuse it just like anything else. Sure. You know, like Coca-Cola or anything else. But so I'm in the cannabis industry. The week after 420 is historically slow for us because everyone has 420 deals, so they pick up heavy. You know, and they what happens is the week after 420 we had a dip in sales, and of course I start to think like, what in the hell is going on? My driver's like, you know, sending business other places, getting a kickback, you know, all these things start turning in my mind, and then I literally, what the hell did we do last year? Okay, cool, that was a slow year. Same thing around Christmas. Like the wheels start to fall off, you know what I mean, during Christmas, because it's slower for like most businesses outside of like if you're buying gifts, you know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, every year I start to go, what the hell like is going on, you know what I mean? So we do have an addiction.
Yeah.
There's kind of the same there too. You know,
I really don't like that one, man.
I don't either, man.
But at the same time, I'm wondering like maybe that's what keeps us.
It is.
You know.
It is 100%, because now I think we both listened to or read enough books and talked to enough people to know that like that means we give a shit. Like, I have a music festival that I'm going to, and I have some friends' bands that are playing here this weekend and stuff. And the thing is in the back of my mind, because I haven't done my personal finances and books so far this month because I keep getting busy. In back of my mind, like my bills aren't gonna get paid or something. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Next thing you know, my phone's gonna get shut off. I'm like, what is wrong with me, man? Just chill.
You're pretty far away from getting your phone shut off.
Exactly. You know, I start tripping, man. But you know, I mean, that's what, you know, it's crazy. But I guess where I'm going with this, and I keep taking the scenic route, is that, you know, I want to start and start soon doing some sort of mentorship classes with yourself, with JC, with Vinny, who is you know, who owns the other print company here in town, you know, my partner here, with you know, Jimmy being a counselor and to help people understand the brain on why an addiction, whether it's food or anything else, is why it's happening and how to get out of it. And then, you know, we have the Flat Black shop in that I'm now part of in Palm Desert, my partner Pete, and it's a perfect space to do some mentorship classes free to whoever wants to come. And first come, you know, till the seats fill up and you can't stand in there, you know what I mean, to capacity. I want to do some mentorship classes where we bring in people within our circle or with outside of our circle that actually understand things, where it's as simple, I think, as sometimes as saying, look, we're going to run 2 classes today. One's going to be on writing resumes. The other is going to be like on life after lockup kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like with some people that, you know, we run across or probably even know that's been incarcerated that now have jobs and pads and cars and things like that. And to really work together, at least with yourself and Pete, my partner, to really organize a schedule between the 2 shops and a few other locations, you know what I mean, to like actually start. And I'm hoping, to be honest with you, that this turns into almost a crew mentality where it's like, now we got crew members in Chicago, almost like a fight club, you know what I mean? It's like, now there are people doing it here, now there's people doing it there. And I literally want to do something where it's almost called like, you know, what's next? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you know, because it's, you know, I think that that's important. I know we've talked about that. And like, what are your thoughts about, I mean, I know the answer to this because you've already given back so much to just the graffiti community alone. What's your thoughts when like I first approached you about this?
Well, I'll try not to do too scenic of a route to it, but you know, I've always been really bad at keeping in touch with people, and this entrepreneurship stuff, like I've been an entrepreneur for, I guess, 21, well, probably longer if you count some of the little businesses in the 90s, you know. But officially, I would say I started becoming like a real well, I don't know how to say it. I've run my own businesses for, you know, since 2002. But 2019 was really a turning point time for me. I really started reading, doing personal development. That's when I started coming across this phrase, like, you're the sum of, you know, the fucking 5 people, you know, those things like
5 people you surround yourself with.
If you're hanging around with 5 losers, you're going to be the 6th. If you're hanging around with 5 billionaires, you're going to be the 6th. Like shit like that. A lot of different ways of saying it. And so I started thinking, I'm like, fuck, dude, I don't know anybody that's doing shit, you know? Like, so I joined this entrepreneur group, the Arte Syndicate, started learning. That's also like a community type thing. So you have access to people. But before I met you, excuse me, I actually had done a post on there, and I was like, how do you guys keep track of people, you know? Because like people come in and out of your life and you don't know, you're like, oh yeah, I don't remember that guy's name. Like, how do you, like, do you have a device? Like, obviously we have our phone, but do you have like an app or something, or do you have a system that you use? And so before I met you, I'd actually reached out, and I was trying to get some help. Like, how do you do this? Like, I've always been really bad about it. Yeah. And you see, like we talked about with texting and like getting back to people, I'm terrible about
I'm bad about that too. I guarantee right now I have at least 70 text messages. So even when I text you, it seems like you're blowing me off. I'm getting back to you're back in the rotation at the time I text you. And, I got to do the same thing.
Well, so then when and it was kind of funny when you and I were talking on Instagram, I didn't know I was talking to you because I said, oh yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know if you remember this message, but I was like, I'm trying to keep track of different people, like.
Oh yeah. And the Raised by Wolves,
and you were like,
Instagram,
yeah, it's me. And I'm like, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't make the connection because we've been interacting.
Man, I tend to run. I have the Raised. I sometimes am on Raised by Wolves. I'm on my personal, and then this PR company I'm working with starts this new fucking page, and I'm like, great. Now my friends are really gonna be pissed because now I have another Instagram page.
Yeah. Well, so you were one of the people that when I met you, I was like, I gotta figure out.
Yeah.
I still don't have a system for it, but I have a list. It's just called people.
Yeah.
And I have like Instagram accounts and shit, and it's like people I want to keep track of. So like, there's some Vegas graffiti writers that like have said, hey, let's do some stuff together, and like, cool, all right. I always forget about all those people, and then there's like entrepreneurs and shit. And so when you and I started talking, it was exciting because like when you first started coming to the shop, like you don't look, I don't know how to say this. Like you just look like a normal guy, like
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when they say like you're having a meeting with the CEO and then I walk in and they're like,
yeah. And that's how I want to be too. I mean, like, I want to be like, wait, you're that guy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy. Like, you get like fucking old dirty Levi's on. Like, what are you doing?
Hey man, it's
So when we started talking, I just he's another writer. This is whatever.
Yeah.
And, not whatever, but that's the wrong.
I know
word.
I know what you mean.
But then you were like, yeah, my company just went public, or I don't know if we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? What?
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about? Like, and then we started talking about more entrepreneurship because when we started talking, it was just graph stuff.
Yeah,
like we were both graph writers, And so I was like, this is exactly the kind of person that I need to be
I appreciate
around.
That, and I feel the same way. Like that, you're right. Surround yourself with 5 billionaires. You're the 6th. You know what I mean? That is good philosophy.
Yeah, and it's not so much like a one-sided. Maybe the way I'm saying it may sound that way, but it's sort of like what I started thinking. And what I've been dealing with. It's how I said I'm in that entrepreneur group and stuff. When I go talk to these people and like I've gone to the events and meet with them in person and stuff, and it's like it's good. You get a lot of energy. Like I went to this one thing that it's really expensive, and I was like, I don't know if I want to spend this kind of money, but I want to be around these people and see what it's like. I was having all these really great conversations and all this stuff, but it was like all we really have in common is that we're entrepreneurs and that we're driven.
Yep.
And so when I met you, I was like, a light bulb turned on. I was like, there's actually graffiti writers that are fucking doing shit that like read the same shit that I read. And like you and I probably read a lot of the same books. We probably listened to a lot of the same podcasts,
same ebooks.
So we have other things we can talk about.
Yeah. And
we have this other thing. And I'm like, that's more my shit. Like, I don't need to be trying to surround myself with these, I don't want to make it sound negative, but these just people that just seem like way too just like regular.
Like they have no,
like you probably wear slacks with your shirt tucked in.
Yeah.
Like that's cool if that's your lifestyle, but
they're
not
called chads in my industry. Like,
yeah. So
the chads.
Yeah. So I'm just like meeting all these people, and to be fair, there's a lot of people that aren't really that way in the Arte syndicate, but even those people, we don't have any like relations.
Yeah.
So when I just saw like a really good opportunity to like have a network, and I started thinking, and my girlfriend's always told me, why are you in that? Like, actually, that's not fair. She would say, you should just start your own shit because you know more than these people. And I'm like, you're giving me a little more credit, Well,
it's good that my wife's my biggest cheerleader. So,
yeah,
so she thinks I should be the CEO, maybe of like NASA or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah. But when you and I started talking, the light bulb sort of turned on. I was like, what if we had our own kind of network of people that were graph writers but are business owners? Because like Vinny started coming around. I'm like, oh, you want a print shop? That's cool. Yeah. And like
when I paint with him, I'm painting with Emerk almost every Sunday. We do this thing called Sunday service.
Yeah, I've seen that.
joke. That's kind of a joke on his end, but you know, we hardly ever in the car ride there, car ride back, we're talking business because he's very much an entrepreneur. He's tied in with the city. He's doing a lot of things that you're doing with Machine Studio with Flat Black, and so it's like, yeah, that's why I think it's such a good. We could be doing some mentorship classes in Southern California, doing some here in Vegas, and we have that commonality, not just being entrepreneurs, but we can bring people in to really help the community. We understand the community, you know.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing, and not to get these like personal conversations, like inside shit, I tend to not want to listen to them, so I don't want to bore your audience with like inside shit. Like, remember that time?
That's why I have professionals on. JC's done a lot of podcasts. You have I'm just winging this shit, man.
Yeah,
people
we're all winging it.
They don't great too.
Yeah. So, but just to you know, that quote, add value. I hate that quote, but this is what it is. You know,
what it is.
But to try to bring it in, you know, you came around at a time when things were rolling. You know, like 2019, beginning of 2020, shit really started. I was like, I gotta take shit seriously. Like an urgency, you know, and I'm feeling it more and more. Like as I get older, you know, I'm like, I'm gonna be 50. Like everything's fucking urgent now, you know, like I have to do all this shit. Like I'm lucky to have lived this long. Like a lot of people die like so early.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I feel this incredible sense of urgency to build this success and all this stuff. I'm not a materialistic person. I mean, I could probably tell by the way I dress, but I don't really need things. I want security, obviously, but I want to rescue 1 million dogs, you know, like I have all these kind of things that I want to do. And another thing that's like really starting to occupy a lot of my space in my head is trying to become the best example, because leading by example, that phrase, some coach, I don't follow sports, so don't hate me for not knowing who said this, but it's like leading by example is not the best way, it's the only way. And things like that. And a lot of things that Andy Frisella says, like personal excellence is the greatest form of rebellion or something like that. I
love that saying.
Yeah. And then the all this stuff that's going on in the country, and just like going out there and just seeing, you know, like when I was a kid, when you were a kid probably too, that there wasn't this many overweight people. So it's like, there's something weird going on, and I want to contribute something to making the world better.
And these are all these classes we're talking about, because I want to leave it so open where it's what's next, where let's say you're trying to get your life together and you've never done drugs, you've never been incarcerated, but you're having problems because you don't hang around healthy people. Well, we could bring some health coaches in, or like we're two good examples. Like, you know, in 2019, when I stopped drinking, I was 315 pounds.
Jesus.
You know what I mean?
You wouldn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. Know? So the thing is and I had ballooned up to that because of drinking and bad habits, and didn't really hang out with anybody healthy.
Yeah,
so
it was
pretty
normal.
Easy. Yeah, you know, you hang around crows. If you're an eagle, you'll start acting like a crow. You know what I mean? It's kind of that thought. So these are part of those classes. You know, I want to make sure that, you know what I mean, we get these things kicked off, and I think that we're now at a point. That's why I wanted to have you on here for multiple reasons, but also talk about that, about like us really doing that and making the Machine Studio here a home for those, and then you know, Flat Black in Southern California, and then the Kava Bar that we're building out both. Like Vegas will be later this year, and then soon in Palm Desert. You know, making these places all like hubs for these courses, to where ideally that would be awesome if there was there was 4 different classes going on at the same night, twice a month, you know what I mean? All different. And I know that takes some organization, but I'm willing, even just personally, to put, you know, staff in place, you know what I mean, to organize a calendar, you know what I mean, to make this happen.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I think being successful, whatever that means to you, but financially successful, it allows you to do things like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you hear a lot of people saying, I don't need money. I give back and I do all this stuff. And like, you know, let's say I was like that, and I'm like, fuck it, man. I'm just going to like make just enough to pay my bills. I mean, in all honesty, that's how much I pay myself for my company. Like I pay myself exactly what I need to survive, you know, and
but
everything
you're in a building phase.
Everything else goes into the company. But like at some point, like I want to be able to make more money for myself because it's important to be able to do that stuff. Like if I was like saying, I want to rescue a million dogs, you know, that's a goal of mine, or a million animals, I would say. And I didn't have that sort of mentality that I want to build wealth. All I can really do is volunteer my time. And like, that's not a renewable thing. You can make more money. You can't make more time. So like, you're inspiring to me because you're a lot further along financially than I am. But I see that you have a lot more abilities to do things. You have a lot more leeway to, like you said, I'm willing to put staff in place. I literally can't do that right now. Like I had a hard enough time putting staff in my own fucking business, you know? And so to get to that point, you have to have money to do that.
And this means a lot. Like my transition, not to, you know, I mean, well, in a few years from now, you know, 90% of my time, if I have this set up right, 90% of my time will be doing things that will make me an income because there are some products attached to what I'm doing. But more importantly, 90% of my time, I think, will be helping people like directly. You know what I mean? That's the way, and it has everything to do with Raised by Wolves, what we're doing, because that's something that's important to me, because like I always, people had always told me when I was younger that I should have been a teacher because they said, you know, I was good at motivating a staff. I was good to, you know, unfortunately, it's become almost a curse where I can usually pull somebody out of the funk and motivate them. You know what I mean? When I was manager of the year one time at a job, they bought me a fucking book of matches, and I was like, what are these? And my DM, kind of corny but cool now that I'm thinking back, he goes, this is because you have the ability to light fires in people's asses. And I was like, haha. You know what I mean? But now I'm thinking that's fucking kind of cool that he did that. You know what I mean? I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, you know, but the thing is I got to be able to, I have to, it's become like a need for me to give back. You know what I mean? And like, I'm glad that my wife balances my life out, because if before meeting her, I was a monster. I never slept. I literally would wake up in the morning, work, drink during the day, but I would tell people my 50% is better than most people's 100. So fuck it. Like, I'm still going to drink. But, you know, and I think you're on your path to, I mean, I've seen just personally your business grow. Like, you know what I mean, in a short period of time. And you're definitely on your path to do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it motivates me, because sometimes I lose the motivation to push my business sometimes, because I'm doing damage control so much. Sometimes I lose the motivation to actually be actively in there driving the business. And I just told our operations manager yesterday, I go, I need to get to a place, because we just hired a COO for the company. I need to get to a place where Travis is taking a lot of the shit off my plate, so I can go out there and do and drive the business forward, because I'm looking at a finish line close, you know what I mean? A close finish line here. And I'm like, I need to get an evaluation by this time. I need to be doing this, have this person in place. I'm like laser focused on that, but I'd rather be laser focused on what you're doing. I miss the shit with, I'm kind of going through with Raised by Wolves, but now because I am a little bit more financially available, like more like I didn't want to hang shelves the other day, so I paid somebody to do it. Like, you know what I mean? So there are shit like that. You know, I was like, fuck these shelves. I can hang shelves. I know how to do that shit, but I was like, I gotta get on some laptops, you know what I mean? And so I think, again, take it back to these classes, like, you were the right person 100% to do this with. Same thing with Pete, and that for sure will probably be the first person to watch this, because he loves the episodes, and like, you know, you motivate him. He, like, with Flat Black, he was just like, dude, let's just fucking, he's doing it, he's getting it, you know awesome. What I mean? Like, and like, he respects the hell out of you, and I don't think you guys have ever actually met in person.
I don't think so either. We talked on Instagram before.
Yeah, and Pete, it's funny because when that's why you can't judge a book by a cover. And I tell him this all the time. Pete looks like he'll murder you if you met him.
Yeah, but the thing I didn't know what he looked like until you guys did a video.
Yeah, together. He's the nicest fucking guy in the world, and like, and I don't think that younger guys should take what I just said wrong, because he's still fucking Pete, and he'll get loud with somebody. He's from LA, you know what I mean? But
post that
but like, the thing is that, but he wants the best, and when I talked to him about Raised by Wolves, he wanted to be involved. He was like, I want to be involved with what you're doing. You know, we're directly affecting some people I'm from same crew he's from, we're directly affecting people positively right now with people in the crew because of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Where it's motivational talks. I feel like when we go on Sunday service with guys, like I feel like everyone's so fucking uplifted after we paint, dude.
Yeah,
It's like it's like a real church service. That's kind of why we call it Sunday service.
That's cool.
But I want to kind of, I guess, to kind of wrap up a little bit. I know, I don't even know how long this has gone, but I also want to keep the listeners. So, you know what I mean? Is that, I appreciate you being on the show. Is it safe to say that we're going to get some of these meetings going pretty soon here? We'll start putting together a calendar. Before I even leave Vegas on this trip, I'd like to, if you're down with it, I'm short for time now because I got here late, but I like to still get together and like kind of talk about that a little bit. And then, I think that really to end is to really, one, thank you for being on here. I hope everyone listens to how can they find the podcast?
It's just called Graffiti Machine. You can find it on any podcast platforms.
Spotify, Apple.
Yeah, there's a website, graffitimachine.com. And I think you can push like subscribe.
Okay.
And there's all the shit that's on there. And then YouTube is Machine Studio. All the episodes are there, but they're audio.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
gotcha.
Yeah,
that's cool. And then I encourage everybody to go back and listen to some of the early episodes where Cub was on.
Yeah.
Those are great. Those are really good episodes. He's technically on every episode still.
Yeah, he ends that every episode. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, the first 17 episodes have him on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then we're going to start these classes. I want everybody to kind of know that that's where we're going here. We took, again, I say this all the time because someone told me I take the scenic route to things, but we take the scenic route today to basically say that, introduce you guys to Mike, who we'll be doing a lot of things with. And we're going to start doing some mentorship classes, and it'll be all over our website, our socials, and, probably Graffiti Machine and Flat Black and everyone else that's involved. You'll be able to see, what we're doing, some updates, some flyers and of some classes, and they're free to whoever wants to be there. We'll pack the place till the fire department says we can't put any more people in these, meetings, hopefully. But if you guys are, if you guys are interested in, listening to the Graffiti Machine podcast, I definitely encourage you to do so. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap? Like, anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say? What's going on?
I don't really have any plugs or shout outs, but I do want to just stress that it's something that I believe in now, that we all have a responsibility to be the best version of ourselves because somebody's watching us. And I say this on my show all the time because I really truly believe this, that it doesn't matter who you are. There's somebody that's looking at you to see what plays to run. You know what I mean? Even if you're a little kid, your little sister or something is looking at you to see what to do. And as adults and as people that have the freedom to, make our own decisions, obviously kids, you got to do what your parents, as grown-ups, like we need to be leveling up, you know what I mean? And it's not so much, you can do it for yourself, but it's most important in my opinion that the more we all level up, the more everybody else is going to level up. It's an exponential thing. It can spread just like a virus, like when you started losing weight, I'm sure there was people that were like, shit, man, maybe I should do something.
Yeah. It's crazy how that works.
You bring people with you. So, that's one of my missions right now is to be the best version of myself and try to share as much information as I can and hopefully inspire a few people along the way, and then they'll inspire some people. And then I think that if more people start thinking along those lines, then we can have a much better society.
Yeah, that's really the goal. That's the goal in what we're doing here, man. That's why I'm glad we're going to be doing some stuff with you.
Cool.
Well, if you are, just to end the episode like the rest of the episodes, if you or anybody is struggling with addiction, please reach out to us on our website or our socials, or just look up where to go to a AA or NA meeting at. Our website is RZDXWLVS. That's www.RZDXWLVS, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram under the same RZDXWLVS, Raised by Wolves. Thank you for listening or tuning in, and hope you guys have a great week. That's all.